Dear students, subscribers and the viewers, welcome to the IAS Mentor. This would be our lecture number 15 in the series Indian Polity, and we'll continue with our discussion on the topic Union and its territories. We started the topic Union and its territories in the last class. We'll continue discussing that. In fact, in the last class, we have discussed the provisions of Article 1, 2, 3 and 4. And with that, the discussion of this particular topic is not yet complete. Still, we'll have to understand certain things to complete the understanding of part 1 of the Constitution. That is, which covers Article 1, 2, 3 and 4. But before I get into Article 1, 2, 3 and 4, we have already said this in all our lectures, and I would like to repeat that. The objective of this particular series is to provide a broader framework on the topic Indian polity, and in the process to have a broader idea on the Indian Constitution of India. And in the process, we will also cover some of the important books, especially like LAXMIKANTH, which is also considered to be important for the students preparing for UPSC examination. And this series is not only useful for the students preparing for UPSC examination, but also for the various state public service examination. So please do follow, and if you are following this series, do follow all the lectures for the full benefit out of this particular series, which will continue for another 2 to 3 months before we'll complete this particular series. So now we'll get into the lecture, but before I get into the lecture today, I will just take a moment to revise whatever you've seen in the last lecture so that the continuity is there for the students. So what is Article 1 of the Constitution? Article 1 is giving us the name of our country, that is India, that is Bharat shall be Union of States. And Article 1 further states that India is an union of states. That means though it is a federal political system, majorly the powers are given to the union. More powers are given to the union, where the states have no right to secede from the union, and the union can unilaterally destroy the states. So in the opinion of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, though it is a federal political system, though it is a federation, this federation is more or less an union. And apart from that, Article 1 also gives us the information as to what is the territory of India. The territory of India comprises of the territory of the states, the territory of the union territories, and any other territory that may be acquired by India in the future. That means India is a sovereign state which can acquire territory in the future. And where do you get this information as to what are all the various states in India, what are all the various union territories in India, and what are all the territories of such areas? They are all specified in the Schedule 1 of the Constitution. Although Article 1 says India can acquire the territory, but how it shall acquire the territory is not mentioned in the Constitution. India shall acquire territory as per the international laws and as per the international traditions, through acquisition, through annexation, through war, through treaties between the countries, whatever it is. These are all the ways by which India can acquire the territory. But however, if any territory is acquired, how it shall become part of the Indian Constitution, and who has the power to admit or to establish an acquired territory into the Constitution of India? It is the power of the Parliament under Article 2 of the Constitution. The Parliament has the power to admit or to establish a territory into India which otherwise is external to the territory of India on such terms and conditions as it may deem necessary. So it can admit a territory into India as an union territory, or it may admit a territory into India as a state. So all these things can be done by the union territory, by the Parliament, by a way the law it makes. So Article 2 of the Constitution is giving the power to the Parliament to admit or to establish a territory into India which is outside the territory of India into India. But on the contrary, what is Article 3 of the Constitution? Article 3 of the Constitution is giving the power to the Parliament to go for internal reorganization. So whatever internal reorganization they wanted to make, they are not admitting anything outside the territory of India into India, but whatever is within India, any internal reorganization can be done by Article 3 of the Constitution. By using Article 3, the Parliament can do it. Either creating a state into two different states, merging the state, creating a state into a union territory into a state, renaming a particular state. So all these things can be done under Article 3, which is the parliament who has got the power to do this. So basically Article 3 is internal reorganization. Article 2 is admitting a new territory into India. And apart from that, it is also very important that whether this power of the parliament which is given to them under Article 2 or under Article 3. So can they exercise this power by making a law which requires a special majority or a simple majority? Now all these things can be done by the parliament either under Article 2 or under Article 3 by using what is called as a simple majority, and that exception is given to the parliament under Article 2 and Article 3. Although any law that will be made by parliament either under Article 2 or under Article 3 will make changes in the constitution, but however it can be done by a simple act of parliament. So this exception is given by virtue of Article 4 of the constitution. So Article 4 says that any law that will be made by the parliament either under Article 2 or under Article 3, it can be just done by a simple act of parliament, although it can make changes to the Schedule 1 and Schedule 4 of the constitution. But however, you'll have to keep in your mind that any law that will be made by the parliament either under Article 2 or under Article 3, although it will make changes in Schedule 1 and Schedule 4, it can be done by a simple act of parliament. But this exception to amend the constitution, that is Schedule 1 and Schedule 4, by a simple act of parliament is only if the law is making changes either in Schedule 1 or in Schedule 4 or in both, but not to any of the other provisions of the constitution. If the changes are to be made to any of the other provisions of the constitution, then such a law that is made by the parliament can be done only by a special majority, not by a simple majority. For further understanding, you can watch my previous lectures where I have elaborately explained about all these things. And one more thing before I proceed further to the next topic is that under Article 3 of the constitution, if at all a law is to be made, a procedure has to be followed. And what is that procedure? We also seen that in the last class. So you can refer to the previous lecture to understand the procedure, which is also very important. Now with that, I'll come to today's lecture. And in the today's lecture, the most important thing first we'll have to understand is that who is having the power to cede a territory to a foreign country? If at all a territory can be ceded to a foreign country, that's the first question that you have to understand. If at all a territory can be ceded to a foreign country, who is having the authority to cede this territory to a foreign country? And can a territory be ceded to a foreign country by a simple act of parliament, or does it require a special majority? So these are all the questions that we have to understand. In fact, this was not very clear in the original constitution as to who is authority to cede a territory to a foreign country. And to answer this particular question, a reference was made to the Supreme Court of India by the President of India. You might be knowing under Article 143 of the Constitution, if there is no clarity with regard to any of the provisions of the Constitution, the President of India can refer that matter to the Supreme Court. So what is that particular article? It is Article 143. Under Article 143 of the Constitution, if there are certain provisions where there is no clarity, and to have a clarity on those provisions, the President can make what is called as a presidential reference. So this is basically what is called as presidential reference. So presidential reference is nothing but that the President is referring certain matters to the opinion of the Supreme Court, to seek the opinion of the Supreme Court on a particular matter. So in 1960, the President has made a reference to the Supreme Court of India under Article 143 to know this particular question as to whether India can cede a territory to a foreign country. And if India can cede a territory to a foreign country, who is authority to cede a territory to a foreign country? And suppose if it has to be done by the Parliament, what is the majority with which the Parliament can do it? Can the Parliament do it under Article 3 of the Constitution? So these are all number of questions that was referred by the President to the Supreme Court of India, and that came to be what is called as the Babu Union case. In fact, the word re that is mentioning here is nothing but it's a presidential reference. It's not like an ordinary case where somebody has filed a case in the Supreme Court, but it was sent to the Supreme Court by way of what is called as a presidential reference. The President referred this matter to the Supreme Court, and that is why it is called as Re Berubari Union case. Now, in this case, the Supreme Court has to answer, can India cede a territory to a foreign country? Ceding a territory to a foreign country means, can India give some of its territory to a foreign country? And if India is giving some of its territory to a foreign country, then accordingly such territory will be reduced from the Indian constitution, so that they can give the territory to a foreign country. Now, why all this dispute arise is because the dispute between India and Pakistan. Pakistan claimed some of the parts of today Bengal, that is the West Bengal, that they claimed some of the parts there that belonged to Pakistan, and there was some mistake during the partition between India and Pakistan, while they should have got those territories which India is having at that point of time. So they started this dispute somewhere in 1950s. So when they started this particular dispute, the Indian leadership at that point of time, the Indian government decided, okay, we will cede this particular territory to Pakistan, because they wanted to amicably settle this particular dispute. And that is when they decided as to how to cede this particular territory, because the Indian government somehow felt that there was some clerical mistakes based on which the partition has happened. So we'll cede the territory to Pakistan, which is basically a small portion in the northern part of Bengal, which is also called as the Berubari Union. It's not a very big area, a small area, but a disputed territory. So India thought that it will cede the territory to Pakistan, but how to cede it? So the Indian government thought that they can cede a territory to Pakistan under Article 3 of the Constitution. Because if you go through Article 3 of the Constitution, Article 3 of the Constitution says that they can increase the area of a state, they can decrease the area of a state. So all these things can be done under Article 3. So probably if they give a certain territory to Pakistan, that will reduce or decrease the area of West Bengal, or whatever is the Indian territory, it will get reduced. So thereby they can do it, or they can give it to Pakistan under Article 3 of the Constitution, which they thought that they can do it by a simple act of parliament, because we have already understood that any law that can be made under Article 3 of the Constitution can be done by a simple act of parliament. So this is what has been thought. But however, there was lot of resistance to all those things. Lot of petitions came to the president. Lot of political protest was there against the decision of the government. And that is when the president decided that we will refer this matter to what is called as the Supreme Court of India. And let the Supreme Court give the opinion, if at all India has to cede a territory, how it can be done. So the matter was referred by the president under Article 143 of the Constitution, as I already said, through a presidential reference. So the Supreme Court looked into this particular matter, and the Supreme Court categorically said to the first question, does the parliament has the power to cede a territory to a foreign country? The Supreme Court, yes, said the parliament has the power to cede a territory to a foreign country. And if the parliament has a power to cede a territory to a foreign country, then what is the way by which it can cede a territory to a foreign country? That's the next question they have to answer. Where the Supreme Court clearly said, while the parliament has a power to cede a territory to a foreign country, it does not have the power to cede a territory to a foreign country by what is called as a simple act of parliament. That is not possible. They cannot do it under Article 3 of the Constitution. But however, they can do it under Article 368 of the Constitution. That means the parliament has the power to cede a territory to a foreign country, but that ceding territory to a foreign country will make changes in the Schedule 1, because whenever you give a territory to a foreign country, it is going to make some changes in the Schedule 1. So such a change in the Schedule 1 cannot be done by a simple majority in the parliament, but it can be done only by a way of a special majority under Article 368. The reason that was given by the Supreme Court is that whenever you do something under Article 3, which also includes decrease in the area of a state, but that decrease in the area of a state should go to another state in India. That is basically an internal reorganization. So for any form of internal reorganization, you can use what is called as Article 3. But when you cede a territory to a foreign country, there is a decrease in the area of a state, but that area is given to a foreign country. So probably it will not come under the concept of what is called as internal reorganization. So the Supreme Court made it very clear, while yes, the parliament has a power to cede a territory to a foreign country, India as a state has a power to cede a territory to a foreign country, for which the parliament has to make an amendment to the Constitution, But that amendment cannot be done by a simple act of parliament under Article 3, but rather it requires a constitutional amendment under Article 368 of the Constitution. So this is what has been categorically told by the Supreme Court of India. So subsequent to this judgment that is given by the Supreme Court, the Parliament enacted the 9th Constitutional Amendment Act to cede this territory to a foreign country. So now the question is, can India cede a territory to a foreign country? Yes. And how is that they can cede a territory to a foreign country? The Parliament has to pass a law, or they have to amend the Constitution under Article 368, and thereby they can cede a territory to a foreign country. And in order to give effect, the Parliament has enacted the 9th Constitutional Amendment Act to cede Berubari to Pakistan. And similarly, if you see the latest amendment in this regard is the 100th Constitutional Amendment Act. So, the 100th Constitutional Amendment Act was enacted by the Parliament under Article 368 to make sure that there is exchange of enclaves between India and Bangladesh. Suppose let us assume this is India, this is Bangladesh. Between India and Bangladesh, there were a lot of enclaves. What do you understand by enclaves? Enclaves are nothing but small, tiny territories of land of one country which is completely located inside another country. So, for example, a small territory of stretch of land of Bangladesh which is completely located inside India. A small territory of land of India which is completely located inside Bangladesh. Then these territories would be referred to as what is called as enclaves. Enclaves of India inside Bangladesh. Enclaves of Bangladesh inside India. So, these are all basically what is called as enclaves. So, in order to put an end to these enclaves, because it becomes administratively very difficult for any country to serve the people, because if in Indian territory is inside Bangladesh, the people living there would still be an Indian citizen. So, the Indian government to provide all the services to its people become inconvenient. Similarly, same is the case with the West Bengal and their government and their people as well. So, in order to put an end to this particular issue, both the government decided that we will settle down this particular issue, for which both the government have entered into an agreement which is called as the Land Boundary Agreement, LBA. Land Boundary Agreement was signed in 1974. But to give effect to this agreement is that we will exchange these enclaves. The idea is whatever is the Indian enclave in Bangladesh, we will give it to the territory of Bangladesh. And whatever the enclaves in Bangladesh enclaves in India, the Bangladesh will give it to India. So, thereby we will exchange these enclaves and we will put an end to this particular issue. So, this was his agreement. But to give effect to this agreement and to cede those enclaves to Bangladesh, because whatever is the Indian enclaves in Bangladesh, it's an Indian territory. And to give these territories to Bangladesh, you need to make a constitutional amendment. And that amendment was done by the 100th Constitutional Amendment Act 2015. So, thereby India has exchanged these enclaves to Bangladesh. Most of the Bangladesh enclaves were in the states of Assam and in some of the other northeastern states, which now has come to India. And some of the Indian enclaves inside Bangladesh, India has given it to Bangladesh. In fact, in the net process, do you know that who has given more land? Whether India has given more enclaves to Bangladesh or Bangladesh has given more enclaves? In terms of total territory of what has been exchanged, India is a net loser. India has given more land to Bangladesh in the entire process, but however, India as a big nation, a responsible nation, taken this particular decision of giving more territories to what is called as Bangladesh. So, this is basically you will have to understand, but all these things requires what is called as a constitutional amendment under Article 368. Is that clear to all of you? Very, very important topic. So, can India cede a territory to a foreign country? Of course, yes. And what is the way by which it can cede a territory to a foreign country? Only by a way of a constitutional amendment under Article 368. So, now we are moving to one other important topic, that is the reorganization of states. So, we already understood we already understood the provisions of Article 1, 2, 3 and 4. So, now we are moving into another topic, that is the reorganization of states. So, basically we are trying to understand as to how the states have evolved in our country, especially after the commencement of the constitution. That is what we will have to understand. And to understand as to how the states have evolved in India after the commencement of the constitution, first we will have to understand as to how it existed at the commencement of the constitution or how it existed at independence. In 1947, India got independence. The Britishers passed the Indian Independence Act. They gave independence to India. At the time of independence, if you see, the territories in India was broadly classified into two types. Broadly into two types, not only into two types. Majorly the princely states and the British provinces. But these were not the only units. There are also other units. In fact, you know that the Indian Independence Act 1947 has made it very clear that if the princely states want to join India, they can join India, or if they want to join Pakistan, they can also join Pakistan. So most of the princely states joined India. Some princely states wanted to be remain separate, but however they were also annexed with India over a period of time. So if you see at the commencement of at independence, you will understand that the kind of classification of the British kind of classification of India after independence, there were fourfold states. What were the fourfold states? They were Part A, Part B, Part C and Part D states. These were the classification of the states. Now don't think that when India became independent, there were states and union territories. No, it was classified as what? Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D states. Who were there in the Part A state? Part A states were the the British provinces. Whatever was the British provinces before independence, they were all in the Part A states, the larger provinces. And what is a province? You can look into our previous lecture, you will have an idea. And what is Part B states? Part B states were majorly the princely states. Whichever existed as a princely state before independence, they were all considered to be Part B states. Whichever is a provinces before independence, they were all given Part A states. Part C states were commissioner provinces. There were certain commissioner provinces before independence, and those commissioner provinces were considered to be what is called as Part C states. What are the commissioner provinces? Say for example, Delhi, Ajmer, some of these were considered to be what is called as commissioner provinces. In fact, there were 4 commissioner provinces. And then Part D state is nothing but Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So only Andaman and Nicobar Islands was considered as the Part D states. So at independence, if you see the classification of India, they are classified into Part A, Part B, Part C and Part D states. But however, this classification was largely based on how the Britishers have classified India. So even before independence, it was like this. The same classification we carried forward even after independence. But the Indian authorities, they know that sooner or later they have to reorganize India. This Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D classification that existed at independence is largely what the Britishers have done, and they have classified or they have divided India administratively for their own administrative convenience, for their own strategic importance, the way that they can rule India. But that was not extremely in the welfare of the people, or that was not taking into consideration the welfare of people in our country. So when India became independent, the Indian authorities, the Indian government probably, they thought that sooner or later we'll have to reorganize the Indian territories. And what is the way that we will reorganize the Indian territories was a question. And it is yet to be decided formally. Although informally, one of the idea based on which they wanted to reorganize India is on the basis of what is called as linguistic grounds, or it is also what is called as linguistic reorganization. Now, what do you understand by linguistic reorganization? When I say linguistic reorganization, it is basically on the basis of the language that is spoken by a people in a particular part of the country. That means wherever people are speaking a similar language or the same language, that will be grouped as one state. That was an informal idea, a popular idea that was there at that point of time. But the Indian authorities did not move immediately with that particular idea. So they appointed an official commission to study this particular matter. So that came to be what is called as Dar Commission. So Dar Commission was appointed in 1948 by the government of India then to study this particular matter as to how we will proceed with what is called as a reorganization of states in India. Although as I already said, informally the members of the Congress and other influential people thought that we'll go for linguistic reorganization. But however, the government appointed an official commission to study and to give the report to the government as to how they can proceed further. So basically, commission means an expert group of people will be empowered to study a matter and to give the report to the government. The Dar Commission studied this particular matter the Dar Commission was not in favor of what is called as linguistic reorganization. They thought that the linguistic reorganization is not a good idea, which means dividing India on the basis of language is not a good idea, which may go against the unity and integrity of our country. But however, on the contrary, the Dar Commission said that reorganization should be done on the basis of what is called as administrative convenience. That means whatever would help the government of India to administer a large country like India easily, that should be the basis of what is called as reorganization, but not on the grounds of what is called as linguistic reorganization. People were disappointed with the report that was given by the Dar Commission. So to study this particular matter, again a committee was appointed, a 3-member committee. So this time a 3-member committee, and all the 3 members were members of the Constituent Assembly, a very influential members of the Constituent Assembly. And that popularly came to be what is called as a JVP committee. J for Jawaharlal Nehru, V for Vallabhbhai Patel, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and P for Pattabhi Sitaramayya. So 3 members of the Indian National Congress, 3 members of the Constituent Assembly of India at that point of time, 3 members known for their high integrity and also their leadership qualities. A 3-member committee was appointed to study this particular matter, which came to be what is called as JVP committee, and to report the government as to what should be the way ahead and how they shall proceed with this reorganization. In fact, this JVP committee also rejected the idea of linguistic reorganization. They also felt that the Dar Commission was right in rejecting the idea of what is called as linguistic reorganization. So they also completely rejected this particular idea. So there was more disappointment among the people, and subsequently after this particular report, people became disappointed in certain parts of our country, especially in the state of Madras. At that point of time, if you see, the state of Madras was one of a very big province in our country, and there was a large Telugu speaking community who are also part of Madras, along with the people who are speaking Tamil. So this Telugu speaking community in the state of Madras, they wanted to have a separate state. This was already their demand, and they thought that it will fructify or it will become a reality after independence. But however, after Dar Commission and subsequent to the JVP committee, this linguistic reorganization was not to be a reality, because both the commission as well as the JVP committee rejected the idea of linguistic reorganization. And that is when the protests started happening in the state of Madras, especially the Telugu speaking community in the state of Madras. They wanted to have a separate state on linguistic grounds. So there was a lot of protest that was happening, which was spearheaded by many leaders. In fact, one of their local leader, Potti Sri Ramalu, who went for a hunger strike for 56 days, and after 56 days of hunger strike for the cause of separate state of Andhra Pradesh for the Telugu speaking people in the state of Madras, he lost his life. And subsequently, the protests became so violent that the government of India could not manage this, and then they agreed that they would create what is called as a separate state of Andhra Pradesh for the Telugu speaking people in the state of Madras, and thereby in 1953, Andhra Pradesh became the first state in independent India to be created on grounds of what is called as linguistic lines. So this is very, very important. Which is the first state in India to be created on the lines of linguistic grounds? It is Andhra Pradesh in 1953. So 1953, Andhra Pradesh was created on linguistic ground. So after Andhra Pradesh was created, there were multiple demands in other parts of India as well. And that is when the government thought that again they will appoint a committee to study this particular matter in depth as to how to proceed with what is called as reorganization. So after Andhra Pradesh was created in 1953, a specific commission was appointed again to study this particular matter, and that came to be what is called as a first reorganization commission. It is also alternatively called as Fazl Ali Commission. So students, don't get confused if in the examination they ask first reorganization commission or Fazl Ali Commission. In fact, both these things are the same. It is also called as Fazl Ali Commission because this commission was headed by Mr. Fazl Ali, and thereby it is also referred to what is called as the Fazl Ali Commission. This commission studied this particular matter moving across the entire length and breadth of India, and then by 1955 they came out with a report and they submitted to the government of India as to what shall be the basis of linguistic reorganization. So when they submitted the report in 1955 to the government of India, they came out with certain parameters as to how or what shall be the basis based on which the government shall go for what is called as reorganization. But one thing that they have categorically mentioned in that particular report is that they rejected the idea of what is called as linguistic reorganization shall be the sole basis of creating states. That means Fazl Ali Commission or the first Reorganization Commission was not completely against the idea of linguistic reorganization, but they categorically said linguistic reorganization should not be the only basis on which the reorganization should happen in our country. So that should not be the sole ground, but it may be one of the ground along with the other grounds. So they rejected the idea of what is called as one language, one state. So they rejected it, which means linguistic reorganization should not be the only ground on which the reorganization should happen. But they are not against this idea completely. But they said that there are certain parameters that the state has to take into account in creating new states. What are the parameters? That anything that would affect unity and integrity of India should not be taken into consideration. Anything that would promote unity and integrity shall be taken into consideration. And apart from that, linguistic and cultural homogeneity shall be taken into account. That means, along with unity and integrity, you shall also take into account the cultural homogeneity, the linguistic homogeneity. That means similar language, same language, that shall be taken into account, but that shall not be the only ground. That is what they have said. And then the financial and the economic considerations. You'll have to create states in such a way that tomorrow if these states are created, that states would be independent in terms of their financial requirements. Suppose if we create a region, that region has no financial viability, there is no way for the region to generate some finances, then the state cannot function independently. The state cannot have resources to provide services to the people. So whatever way that you will create the state, try to make sure that the state will have certain natural resources, the state can have certain economic and industrial activities in the future, which will sustain their economic requirement for the state government to serve the people of that particular state. And also, apart from that, you should also take into account the welfare of the people and the nation. So the larger idea is that whatever way that you will create or reorganize states, it should take into consideration whether it will be resulting in the welfare of the people, it will not affect the unity and integrity, whether it will be financially viable, and apart from that, you can also take into consideration the cultural and the linguistic homogeneity. So to put it in a nutshell, while the first Reorganization Commission did not approve the idea of what is called as one language, one state, or in other words, they strictly did not believe in the idea of what is called as that the reorganization completely happened on the basis of language, but it may be taken as one of the factor along with the other factor. That's the idea of what is called as the first Reorganization Commission. Now, based on the recommendation that is given by the first Reorganization Commission, the government of India accepted this particular report and they passed what is called as the first Reorganization Act 1956. The first Reorganization Act 1956 was passed in order to implement the recommendation that is given by what is called as the Reorganization Commission or the Fazl Ali Commission. So based on the first Reorganization Act, India was divided into what is called as 14 states and 6 union territories. So this was how India was there in terms of the number of units. It was there as 14 states and 6 union territories. So this is the basic understanding you should have. So in 1956 only the union territories were there. In 1956 only 14 states and 6 union territories were created based on the law that is enacted by the parliament, that is the first Reorganization Act. Before 1956, even after independence, the organization of India was only Part A, Part B, Part C and Part D states. And when the states and union territories were created into 14 and 6, that is only in 1956. Now tell me, this 14 states and 6 union territories that was created by the first Reorganization Act, tell me under which article in the constitution this act was passed and what was the majority that was required for the parliament to do all those things, because you try to understand that all these things is basically an internal reorganization. So you can put your answers in the comment box. Is it article 2 or is it article 3? So based on which the parliament has made these things. If you know the answer, you can put it in the comment box. And if you watch my lecture, my previous lecture, you will be definitely in a position to answer this particular question. So in 1956, 14 states and 6 union territories was created. But today we have got 28 states and 8 union territories. What was 14 states and 6 union territories was further extended to today what is called as 28 states and 8 union territories. That means a lot of new states and union territories has been created over a period of time. So let us also try to understand very quickly how these things has happened. Although this part is not very important for your examination, but sometimes they may ask you questions on the chronology. So let me just quickly go through it. Otherwise, this is again I would say not a very important part, but you can just listen to this once. Okay. So after 1956, today we are in 2024. In 2024, if you see the classification of India, it is, as I already said, 28 states and 8 union territories. So this is what we have got. But in 1956, what was the classification? It was 14 states and 6 union territories. Now, how this has gone for a further enhancement? It is done either under Article 2 or under Article 3. So, whatever I will discuss further, try to make it very clear in your mind. Whatever is acquired territory, that is acquired external to the territory of India and brought into India, it is done under Article 2. And whatever is an internal reorganization which is done within India, that is done under Article 3 of the Constitution. So, this is basically how we will have to understand as we will move forward. So, after this 14 states and 6 union territories in 1956, the 15th state that was to be created in India, what is called as Gujarat. So, similar demand also started happening in Gujarat, that from the province of Bombay, that is state of Bombay at that point of time, the Gujarati speaking community, they wanted to have a separate state, and thereby the state of Bombay was divided into 2 separate states. One is Maharashtra, the Marathi speaking community, and the Gujarati speaking community was made as Gujarat. So this is basically done under Article 3 because it's only an internal reorganization. So then we move forward. Then the next thing that has to happen is the union territory of Dadra and Nagar Haveli. So at that point of time, if you see, till 1954, Dadra and Nagar Haveli was ruled by Portuguese. And then the Portuguese left, there was some element of self-rule that was happening in that particular area. Then subsequently, India has acquired that particular territory. India has acquired that particular territory and it became part of India in 1961. So basically, this is an acquired territory, which the parliament can do it under Article 2 of the Constitution. So any internal reorganization, Article 3, acquired territory, Article 2 of the Constitution. And then the next thing is Goa, Daman and Diu. All these things have happened in 1962. So all these things were basically acquired. So Goa, Daman and Diu. So all these things were under the control of Portuguese. And then later these things become part of India only in 1962. In 1962 they become part of India. But they continue to be an union territory. In fact, even Goa continued to be an union territory, although it became part of India in 1962. But later Goa was conferred the statehood in 1987. So while Goa was brought into India, it was an acquired territory and it continued to be an union territory, acquired, and then it continued to be an union territory, acquired and admitted into India under Article 2. It continued to be an union territory till 1987. 1987, this union territory was conferred a status of a state. So that means while it was acquired and admitted into India, it was done under Article 2. And later it was converted from a union territory into a state, that was done under Article 3. So that happened in 1987. Then Daman and Diu was also made a separate union territory. So any internal reorganization, try to understand, that is all done under Article 3 of the Constitution. Anything you acquire from outside, that is done under Article 2 of the Constitution. Puducherry then in 1962. So Puducherry was under the control of French even after India became independent. But then we acquired Puducherry again in 1962. So when you acquire and admit that into India, that is under Article 2. So whenever for the first time you acquire and admit into India, that is under Article 2. So then the next state that was to be created is the state of Nagaland. So Nagaland was part of Assam, and from Assam a certain territory was separated and that became a separate state of Nagaland. So that was created by virtue of what is called as Article 3 of the Constitution. So any internal reorganization, Article 3, anything you acquire from territory, any acquired territory outside India that you admit into India, it is done under Article 2. So although you don't have to remember all these things exactly, but I'm trying to explain as to how these things have happened. So maybe you can remember the chronology as to which state has created, at least the states, as to what is the order in which they are created, in case there is a possibility that they can ask you in the examination. Although I don't think that such a question may come in the UPSC examination, but maybe in some of the state service examination there is a possibility they can ask you such questions. And then the next thing is how Haryana was created. So Haryana was part of Punjab, the state of Punjab, but from there the Hindi speaking people wanted a separate state, and that is when the Haryana was created in 1966 as a 17th state of India. At the same time, a specific part which is called as Chandigarh was also conferred a status of union territory. So by the same thing. So all these internal reorganizations are done under Article 3 of the Constitution. And then Himachal Pradesh, which was earlier in union territory, was made the 18th state. So converting an union territory into a state is what? It is also done under Article 3 because it's basically an internal reorganization. And then Himachal Pradesh became the 18th state. And then there was a lot of reorganization that was happening in the northeastern states. The northeastern states have gone for a lot of reorganization. In fact, 2 union territories of Manipur and Tripura was given the status of a state. That means earlier they were part of the union territory. Now they have been conferred a status of a state. Manipur become the 19th state. Tripura become the 20th state. So whenever you convert an union territory into a state, can you tell me which article? It is Article 3 of the Constitution. And then Meghalaya, which was considered to be an autonomous state within the state of Assam. So that means within Assam, it was given some element of autonomy, but now that was made as a separate state. So Meghalaya became the 21st state of Assam. 21st state of India. And then subsequently, 2 new union territories were created. One is Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim. So this is gradually how the number of states and the number of union territories kept on increasing in India. So all these things are done either under Article 2 or under Article 3. Article 3 for internal reorganization. Article 2 is for acquiring a territory and then admitting that into India. Sikkim became the next state of India. So Sikkim became the 22nd state of India. But here you'll have to note, Sikkim was not part of the internal reorganization. Sikkim was acquired and then admitted into India. So that it was done by what is called as Article 2 of the Constitution. So this is what basically you'll have to understand. And then the subsequent states to be created are Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh, Goa. So all these things have been given a status of a state. They become the 23rd, 24th and the 25th state. Mizoram the 23rd state, Arunachal Pradesh 24th state, and then Goa was 25th state. Now try to understand, all these things were earlier in union territory, and these union territories were conferred the status of a state. So these are all done under Article 3 of the Constitution. Alright. So this is basically what you'll have to understand. And then the latest set of reorganization that has happened post 2000 and after. 2000 and after, if you see, there was also some of the states that has been newly created. But whatever internal reorganization that has happened prior to 2000 and after 2000, there's a small element of change. Although they are done under Article 3, whenever I talk about internal reorganization. So prior to 2000, if you see, most of the reorganization that was done in India, they are done on the basis of linguistic reorganization. So the major factor that they have taken into account is the homogeneity of the language and the culture. But if you see 2000 and after, some of the new states and some of the reorganization has happened, they are all largely on the grounds of what is called as regional backwardness. That means within a state, although the people might be speaking the same language, but certain part of a particular state has become backward. To address this regional backwardness or regional disparity, new states has been created. So what are such states that has been created? If you see, Chhattisgarh was created from the state of Madhya Pradesh, Uttarakhand has created from the state of Uttar Pradesh, and Jharkhand has been created from the state of Bihar. So all these new states that was created from the respective states, and these regions have become really backward. And to empower these regions and to make these regions developed, it was possible that they thought by creating a separate state. So although the people were speaking the same language, but still a separate state was created because of regional disparity. So Chhattisgarh, Uttarakhand and Jharkhand, they become the 26th, 27th and 28th state respectively. So all these things were done under Article 3 of the Constitution. And then in 2014, another state was created again on the basis of regional disparity, is the state of Telangana from the state of Andhra Pradesh. So thereby Telangana became the 29th state of India, again done under Article 3 of the Constitution. So you might wonder that now I have already said 29 states, but I said in the beginning of starting this particular topic that today we have 28 states and 8 union territories. So now we are seeing 29 states. So what happened? That is because, and subsequently a new development has happened in 2019, that a particular state in India was converted into 2 union territories. So the state was converted, and which state was converted into 2 union territories? The state of Jammu and Kashmir was converted into 2 union territories, again under Article 3 of the Constitution. So under Article 3, a particular state was converted into 2 union territories, and they are converted into 2 union territories. One is the union territory of Jammu and Kashmir, and other is the union territory of Ladakh. So earlier we had 29 states and we had 7 union territories at that point of time. So this 29th state was converted into 2 union territories. So that would make 28 states and 9 union territories. But again 2 union territories has been merged. So what are the union territories that has been merged? In 2020, subsequent to this, 2 union territories has been merged. That is union territory of Dadra, Nagar Haveli and Daman and Diu. So resulting of all these changes, today we have got what is called as 28 states and 8 union territories. So this is the present administrative structure of India. In the future, can it go for a change? Yes, it may go for a change. You never know. It is a power of the parliament to acquire a new territory also and admit them into India, or probably to go for an internal reorganization under Article 3 of the Constitution. So basically what you'll have to remember, 2 things. One is, if at all a territory is acquired from outside India and then admitted into India, whose power is that? Parliament under Article 2. Any internal reorganization, be it creating a new state, merging existing states, creating a new union territory, creating a union territory into a state into a union territory, changing the name of the state, everything is done by the parliament under Article 3 of the Constitution. But as a general principle, you have to remember that whenever a law is made by the parliament, either under Article 2 or under Article 3, if they are going to make changes only in the Schedule 1 and Schedule 4, it can be done by a simple act of parliament, or in other words, a simple majority is sufficient enough to make changes in the Schedule 1 and Schedule 4 of the Constitution. But whenever they make law either under Article 2 or under Article 3, and if the law that is made by the parliament under Article 2 and Article 3, if it is intending to make changes apart from Schedule 1 and Schedule 4, that is even outside Schedule 1 and Schedule 4 in the Constitution, then it requires a special majority under Article 368. So this is a general principle that you should keep in your mind. So what are the things that we have covered till this point of time? Very quickly, if you see. So whoever watching this particular lecture, I would say you watch both lecture 14 and lecture 15. If you watch lecture 14 and if you do not see lecture 15, then you will not get the complete story. If you just watch only the lecture 15 also, you will not get the complete story. So to get the better benefit of this topic, union and its territories, I would suggest you to watch both lecture 14 as well as lecture 15. First 14 and then 15. Alright. So what are the things we have covered? We have understood what is there in Article 1. We have seen what is Article 2. We have seen Article 3. Difference between Article 2 and Article 3. And under Article 2 and Article 3, what majority is required? Normally simple majority. But if they are making amendments outside Schedule 1 and Schedule 4, then it requires a special majority under Article 368. This exception is given to them under Article 4. We have seen, can India cede a territory to a foreign country? The answer is yes. And who is authority to do that? The Parliament by a constitutional amendment under Article 368. And to that extent, the latest such amendment we have done is the 100th Constitutional Amendment Act. And then we have understood with regard to the reorganization of the states in our country. And if you see the reorganization of the states in our country, initially at the independence, it was Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D states. 1956 it became 14 states and 6 union territories, and today 2024, at the time of recording this particular lecture, we have got 28 states and 8 union territories. In the future, can it go for a reorganization further? Yes. It depends upon the power of the parliament and how the parliament exercises their power, either under Article 2 or Article 3 of the Constitution. So this is basically the information that you should have. So we have covered this lecture from all the dimensions, and I'm quite sure that the students who are watching this lecture can answer most of the questions that can come from this particular area. So with that, please come to this particular question. In order to cede a territory to a foreign country, it requires a bill to be passed in the parliament with what type of majority? So I am asking, to cede a territory to a foreign country, what majority? Simple majority, absolute majority, special majority, none of the above. So you can put your answers in the comment box. If you have any queries related to the lecture or any other queries related to preparing for the examination, UPSC or any of the other state service examination, you can reach out to me either through my Telegram channel or through my Instagram account. So thank you very much for watching this particular lecture. So before we wind up this particular session, I would request all of you to recommend this particular videos to all your friends or family members, whoever is preparing for the UPSC examination or any of the other state service examination, and I'm quite sure that it is going to be immensely beneficial to the students preparing for the various competitive examinations. Thank you once again. All the very best.